Mercedes could lose the next era of Formula One before it even begins. Not because Red Bull outbuilt them. Not because Ferrari found magic. But because the FIA has reportedly rejected the Petronas fuel their entire 2026 engine was built around. And we are not talking about a small tweak. We are talking about injection pressures above 500 bar. A potential loss of up to 15 horsepower. Fuel vaporizing inside the pump. And an engine concept that may not survive without that exact chemical blend. If this homologation rejection stands, Mercedes does not just lose performance. They lose stability. They lose reliability. They lose their foundation. Customer teams are nervous. Rivals are watching. And the new regulation era is approaching fast. By the end of this video, you will understand why this is not just a fuel issue. It is a potential shift in the balance of power for the next decade. Subscribe now, because what happens next could redefine Formula One's future. This did not explode overnight. It started quietly. Inside laboratories. Inside simulation rooms. Inside Brixworth. Because when you build a power unit for a regulation reset as radical as 2026, you do not start with horsepower. You start with chemistry. Mercedes and Petronas did not treat this fuel as a simple supply agreement. This was integration at the deepest level. Combustion chamber geometry was modeled around a specific flame speed. Injection timing was calibrated around a specific volatility curve. Compression targets were chosen based on a very precise octane resistance window. Change the fuel, and you disturb the entire architecture. Now remember something critical. The new rules reduce fuel flow dramatically. 75 kilograms per hour. That is the ceiling. So if you cannot burn more fuel, you must burn it better. More efficiently. More aggressively. That means higher injection pressures. 500 bar and beyond. Extreme atomization. Ultra-precise combustion control. But sustainable fuel behaves differently. It evaporates differently. It reacts differently under pressure. It has a different vapor profile compared to traditional fossil-based racing fuel. And when you push it to the limit, instability can appear in places engineers do not expect. This is where cavitation enters the conversation. And this is not theoretical. Under extreme suction at the pump inlet, the fuel can begin to vaporize. Tiny bubbles form. When those bubbles are compressed, they collapse violently. That collapse creates shockwaves inside the high-pressure pump. Over time, those shockwaves erode metal surfaces from within. Not visible at first, but devastating if sustained. And here is why Mercedes is reportedly so frustrated. They believed they had engineered a solution. An updated blend. Greater stability. Higher detonation resistance. Better efficiency under extreme compression. Everything aligned with their engine philosophy. But if the FIA rejects that specification during homologation, the entire development direction freezes instantly. Because once homologation closes, flexibility disappears. You cannot experiment freely race after race. You cannot redesign the chemistry every weekend. You are locked into a regulatory corridor. And if your optimal blend sits outside that corridor, you must compromise. Compromise means detuning. Detuning means retarding ignition timing. Retarding ignition means losing peak cylinder pressure. And losing peak cylinder pressure means losing power. Possibly double-digit horsepower. In a sport decided by tenths of a second, that is enormous. But the deeper issue is philosophical. Mercedes appears to have designed an aggressive combustion concept that depends on a very specific fuel behavior. Very tight margins. Very narrow detonation window. If that window shifts even slightly because the fuel composition changes, the engine cannot operate at its theoretical maximum. It becomes conservative. Defensive. And defensive engineering rarely wins regulation resets. Meanwhile, rivals seem composed. Ferrari's fuel partnership appears stable. Red Bull's collaboration with Ford and ExxonMobil reportedly shows strong energy density and clean integration. Silence from competitors often signals confidence. And confidence at this stage of development is powerful. So this is not simply about one rejected batch of fuel. It is about whether Mercedes miscalculated the volatility limits of sustainable chemistry under extreme pressure. It is about whether they pushed innovation further than the regulatory boundaries would allow. And most importantly, it is about whether the engine they built can still deliver its promised performance without the exact fuel it was designed around. Because if the answer is no, then this is not a setback. It is the first crack in the foundation of their 2026 project. Now here is where the situation becomes even more dangerous. Because this is no longer just about performance loss. It is about timing. 2026 is not a normal upgrade cycle. It is a full reset. New chassis philosophy. New aerodynamic targets. Massive hybrid emphasis. And most importantly, a completely new fuel era. Whoever gets this right from day one could control Formula One for years. Mercedes knows this. They lived it in 2014. They understand how powerful an early advantage can be. But the difference now is that the advantage might depend on chemistry that is not approved. If the FIA rejection of the updated Petronas blend stands, Mercedes faces a brutal choice. Run the earlier specification and accept less power. Or redesign hardware around a weaker fuel profile. Both options are painful. Running the older blend means conservative engine maps, lower ignition advance, reduced peak combustion pressure, less efficiency. That directly affects straight-line speed. It affects deployment strategy. It affects race pace consistency. But redesigning hardware is even worse. Because we are under cost cap restrictions. Because homologation windows are tight. Because development tokens are limited. Every major mechanical change costs time. Time that rivals are using to optimize. And here is the part that makes this situation explosive. Customer teams. McLaren. Williams. They rely on Mercedes power. If the factory team must run conservative maps to protect fuel pumps from cavitation, customer teams do the same. If knock risk increases, they feel it too. This is not isolated to one garage. It spreads across the grid. Now imagine the pressure internally. Engineers at Brixworth defending months of chemical modeling. Petronas engineers defending their blend stability. FIA technical delegates enforcing sustainability purity thresholds. This is not emotional frustration. This is structural tension. And there is another uncomfortable dimension. Mercedes' engine concept is rumored to push combustion efficiency very aggressively. Some insiders even whisper about extremely tight compression strategies that leave almost no margin for unstable fuel behavior. If the octane characteristics shift even slightly, detonation risk increases. And detonation is not something you negotiate with. You either control it, or it destroys components. Which means if Mercedes cannot use the optimized blend they planned for, they must artificially create safety margin. Safety margin means detuning. Detuning means lost lap time. Lost lap time means starting the new era chasing someone else. Meanwhile, Red Bull appears composed. Ferrari appears methodical. There are no loud complaints from their fuel partners. No visible crisis. And silence in Formula One often hides strength. This is why the frustration at Mercedes reportedly runs deep. Because from their perspective, they invested in innovation. They engineered a fuel tailored to maximize sustainable efficiency under brutal pressure loads. And now that innovation may be constrained by regulatory interpretation. They feel limited, restricted, cornered by compliance. But here is the question that changes everything. Did Mercedes genuinely miscalculate volatility under extreme injection pressure? Or did they intentionally push the chemistry to the very edge of what the FIA might allow, hoping the performance gain would justify the risk? Because if it was the second scenario, then this is not an accident. It is a gamble. And in Formula One, gambles at the start of a regulation era define reputations. If the FIA does not bend, if the homologation remains rejected, if the engine must operate below its theoretical ceiling, then 2026 may begin with Mercedes not as the hunter, but as the team trying to recover lost ground from the very first lap of the new era. And in a reset this big, starting behind is not a small problem. It can shape the competitive order for the next decade. And now we arrive at the most uncomfortable possibility of all. What if this is not just a technical miscalculation? What if it is a strategic overreach? Because when a team like Mercedes commits to a radical engine architecture, they do not do it blindly. They simulate everything. Combustion modeling, fuel behavior under pressure, detonation thresholds, thermal limits. So if instability appeared at 500 bar and beyond, it means one of two things. Either the sustainable fuel chemistry behaved differently in reality than in simulation, or the margins were so tight that even a small deviation created chaos. And that second possibility is the dangerous one. Because designing with razor-thin margins only works if every external variable behaves exactly as predicted. The exact octane curve, the exact vapor pressure, the exact additive composition, the exact interpretation of FIA sustainability standards. Remove one piece from that equation, and the whole structure shakes. Now consider the bigger picture. 2026 engines are not just internal combustion machines. They are hybrid power systems with almost equal electrical contribution. The combustion engine must operate in a narrow efficiency window to sustain battery charge cycles properly. If knock risk forces ignition retardation, thermal efficiency drops. If thermal efficiency drops, battery recovery becomes less optimal. If battery recovery suffers, deployment on long straights weakens. And suddenly the power deficit multiplies beyond the original horsepower loss. This is how a fuel issue becomes a competitive spiral. But there is another silent factor: confidence inside the garage. When engineers trust their package, development accelerates. When engineers doubt reliability, they become cautious. They protect components. They limit testing extremes. They reduce risk. Caution slows progress. And rivals can sense that. If Red Bull and Ferrari see Mercedes running conservative maps during early running, they will know. They will push harder. They will test more aggressively. They will explore performance ceilings while Mercedes protects hardware. Momentum in a new era is everything. The team that appears strongest early attracts belief. Belief influences drivers. Belief influences sponsors. Belief influences long-term technical direction. This is why the reported anger inside Mercedes is not just about a rejected fuel batch. It is about lost control. They built a project expecting alignment between chemistry and regulation. If that alignment fails, they must adapt under pressure. And adapting under cost cap rules is brutally slow. You cannot throw unlimited resources at the problem anymore. You must choose where to spend development tokens. Engine changes or aerodynamic refinement. Combustion redesign or hybrid optimization. Every choice sacrifices something else. Now think about the timeline. Homologation decisions happen early. Design freeze points arrive quickly. If Mercedes must redesign around a less aggressive fuel profile, they are already weeks behind in optimization cycles. Weeks in Formula One development are massive, especially during a reset. And this leads to the defining question of this entire story. Did Mercedes push sustainable fuel chemistry further than anyone else, aiming for a breakthrough advantage? Or did they build an engine whose performance ceiling exists only with a fuel blend that the FIA will not approve? Because if the answer is the second one, then the 2026 era could begin with Mercedes not at the front of innovation, but trapped by the very ambition that was supposed to secure their dominance. And in Formula One, ambition without regulatory alignment does not create dynasties. It creates seasons of recovery. The real verdict will not come from headlines. It will come when the first race of the new era begins. When engine modes are unleashed. When straight-line speeds are measured. When reliability is tested under real pressure. Only then will we know if this was an early storm that Mercedes navigated, or the first sign that the next chapter of Formula One will be written by someone else.